estimates for the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning. Questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for Transcona.
Just as wrapping up estimates, Mr. Chair, I just want to thank the employees of the department. I know that they do their very best under trying circumstances, and I appreciate your time here these past number of days. It is indeed a very important piece of what we do here in the province. I want to commend you for your dedication to the kids, families, and communities of our province. I don't say that lightly. I know how important it is, and I know what you bring every day to this job. We on this side of the house, or this side of the table, understand that fully and appreciate what you do. I do want to say, too, that I would like to close estimates, Mr. Chair, and move on to the resolutions.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the member for Transcona, the Education and Early Childhood Learning Critic, for his words. And I as well have commended and have absolutely enjoyed and will continue to enjoy working quite closely with all of our leaders within the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning, and I look forward to not only many more months of that, but many more years to come. And I want to commend all of the whole team for all their hard work on a day-to-day basis, for everything that you do for not only myself in the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning, but as well for all of our education partners across this great province of ours. And your service to Manitobans definitely does not go unnoticed. So thank you, everybody, and thank you to the MLA for Transcona for his words, and we'll proceed to wrapping this up.
Thank you very much, and yes, we will move on to resolutions. So Resolution 16.2, resolve that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $42,549,000 for education and early childhood learning, student achievement and inclusion for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.3, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $9,453,000 for education and early childhood learning, system performance and accountability for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.4, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $1,759,967,000 for education and early childhood learning support for schools for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Just it's for support to schools, just a bit of a correction there. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.5, resolve that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $17,088,000 for education and early childhood learning, corporate services for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.6, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $445,645,000 for education. Okay, I'll just repeat that again right from the beginning. Resolution 16.6, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $445,645,000. What am I saying? Okay, I'm going to give you the number. A sum not exceeding $445,644,000 for education and early childhood learning, early learning and childcare for fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.7, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $105,329,000 for education and early childhood learning, costs related to capital assets of other reporting entities for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. Resolution 16.8, resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $260,385,000 for education and early childhood learning, other reporting entities, capital investment for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. The last item to be considered for the estimates of this department is item 16.1 bracket A, the minister's salary, contained in resolution 16.1. At this point, we request that the minister's staff leave the table for the consideration of this last item. Okay, the floor is now open for questions. The honorable member for Transcona.
Mr. Chair, I seek your guidance. Is this the appropriate time to move an amendment to 16.1 sub-bracket A?
Yes, that's correct. The honorable member for Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that line 16.1 sub-bracket A be amended so that the Minister of Education Early Childhood Learning salary be reduced to $21,000. Mr. Chair, can I provide rationale?
It has been moved by the honorable member for Transcona that line item 16.1 bracket A be amended so that the Minister of Education and Early Childhood Learning salary be reduced to $21,000. The motion is in order. Are there any questions or comments on this motion? The honorable member for Transcona.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't say this lightly. I didn't bring that resolution, or sorry, the motion lightly. The latest numbers that we've had access to in the frame show that in 2016, the provincial contribution to public education was $2,019 million. The latest numbers in frame in 22-20 show that it was $2,040 million. $21 million difference, Mr. Chair. We do know that inflation, that $1 in 2016, Mr. Chair, is now worth $1.25. That would have resulted in a substantial increase that needed to be provided. I believe, and I'm sure that everyone around this table believes, that a show of good faith by the minister would be to incur a decrease in order to show an appreciation for what school divisions have had to endure since 2016. Like I said earlier, Mr. Chair, I don't bring this lightly because these are the facts. The numbers show what the numbers show. And it's my hope that through this respectful motion, that we can have agreement around this table, around my amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? Seeing none, is the committee ready for the question? Shall the motion pass?
No.
No.
Yes.
I hear a no. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed to the motion, please say nay.
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 In my opinion, the nays have it. The honorable member for Transcona
Thank you. On division, Mr. Chair.
on division. The motion is defeated on division. All right then, we'll move on to the final resolution, 16.1. Resolved that there be granted to His Majesty a sum not exceeding $6,531,000 for education and early childhood learning, administration, and finance for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2024. Shall the resolution pass?
Pass.
The resolution is accordingly passed. This completes the estimates of the Department of Education and Early Childhood Learning. The next set of estimates to be considered by this section of the Committee of Supply is for the Department of Finance. And shall we briefly recess to allow the ministers and critics the opportunity to prepare for the commencement of the next department? Agreed, and so ordered. The committee will now recess. Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now resume consideration of the estimates for the Department of Finance. Questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner. The floor is now open for questions. The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's good to be back with the Minister and to have this opportunity to ask some questions related to estimates. I do want to, before we get into it, just welcome the new Deputy into his role, Mr. Kamlodi. Welcome here. Looking forward to the exchange today. And I do also want to just take this opportunity to recognize today as the anniversary of the tragedy that happened with the Humboldt's Broncos hockey team. I hadn't had a chance to get up earlier in the day, but I did want to take an opportunity right here to send out recognition to the community and just let them know that our hearts go out to them on this anniversary of that tragic event. I would like to just dive right in here and continue on from our last conversation in the chamber here with the Minister. And I'm going to start out by asking a bit about advertising. And we know that it's mentioned in the supplement there on pages 24, 30, and 46. And I would like to just start by asking the Minister if he can outline what the budget for advertising for $10 a day childcare is.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank the critic for his comments, especially in respect of Humboldt. And this being the 5-year anniversary, I think that was an event that impacted Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Just a tragic set of circumstances, for sure. So I think it's a good time for us to reflect on, as we go into the Easter weekend as well, a time for all of us to reflect on the good things we have and acknowledge that impacted so many families and continues to impact so many families. So thanks for acknowledging that today. As our staff is seeking to provide the information that the member requested, I just want to make some introductions. We do have some new staff around the table today from the last time we met. And as you mentioned, we have a new Deputy Minister in Finance. We welcome Sylvester Kamlodi back to Finance and from his brief stint over in Health as well. So we look forward to Sil providing some sound advice over in Finance and his new role as Deputy Minister. Today with us, we also have Christian Grattan from Finance. Jeff McCullough, Director of Tax Policy, is with us. Rob Maurice, Executive Director of Crown Services Secretariat, is here as well. And at the table, Andrea Sage, Provincial Comptroller, and Matthew Weeb, ADM for Analysis and Strategic Management. So a few new faces to the department, and we're also had a retirement at the ADM level, and a move at the ADM level to another department as well. So we're in the process of filling a couple of ADM roles as well as we go forward. So appreciate great people that we do have working in finance, and we certainly appreciate previous Deputy Minister and wish Mr. Groen all the best in his retirement. And I'm sure this being his first week off, he's enjoying his time away from the office. So we certainly wish Richard all the best in his future endeavors. And I thank all those the other ADMs who have decided to move on and take on different challenges. So we do appreciate that. And I think that I'll be able to respond to the minister or the member on his next question.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Yeah, I certainly thank the Minister for everything he shared and for welcoming the new team here. I'll just re-ask the same question, which was, can the Minister outline what the budget for advertising $10 a day childcare is? I could also add to that, maybe the team is ready as well with this, to know how much was budgeted and how much has been spent.
The Honourable Minister.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We're working on the total budget amount for the 10-day $10 a day childcare from January 1st of this year to present. We've spent $135,000 on the promotion of the 10-day $10 a day daycare, and we'll seek to get the total budgeted number for that advertising in this year's budget.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you very much for that. Relating to advertising, can the minister outline what the budget for advertising in the 2023-24 budget is? And again, how much was budgeted and how much has been spent?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're seeking to get the global number for this year's budget in terms of how much we're going to be budgeting for educating Manitobans about our budget 23. So we're endeavoring to get that number from Communication and Engagement Division. I will tell the member that to date, from January 1st of this year, we spent $210,000 on education and promotion around budget 23.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
I thank the minister for that, and I appreciate his willingness to find that total budgeted and to follow up with that. I'd also like to ask what rules have been prepared for government advertising during a fixed date election, and will those rules be made public?
The Honourable Minister.
I thank you, Mr. Chair, and in response to the member's question, the rules are laid out in the Elections Financing Act. So obviously we'll be cognizant of whatever rules are in that piece of legislation, and certainly government will be adhering to those rules. So I won't pretend to know exactly what those rules off the top, but the intent would be to make sure government, across government, is informed of what those rules are. And I know in the past we've taken direction across government in terms of making sure that each department knows what those rules are and certainly sticks to the rules under that particular piece of legislation.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Thank you. I want to talk a bit about contingency portion of the contingency portion of the projected deficit. We talked a bit about the contingency funds in our last sitting together, and I do want to just ask a little bit more about that. The contingency is currently sitting at 200 million, as I understand it, and I'd like to know if the minister can confirm whether that money is in fact unallocated.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the previous question around the timeline of election activities, staff has provided me a chart here in respect of the Election Finances Act. So looking at the October 3rd fixed date, I know there is some restricted communications period 60 days in advance of that. That would be August the 4th date. Then the election period itself would be, in this case, September 5th to October 3rd. So those are the sort of timelines that we're looking at in respect of an October 3rd election this year. So that's information in respect of the Elections Act. In terms of the contingency we set aside on the revenue, the $200 million revenue, we did have that figure in our budget for the 22-23 year as well. We've added contingency because of the unknown, and we're never sure whether you're going to achieve the level of income. There's lots of different circumstances that could provide variability when it comes to revenue. A lot of that is outside of our control, and obviously economic conditions have a bearing in that as well. So we have left the $200 million in there as a contingency on the revenue side, same as we did for budget 22-23.
The honorable member for St. James.
Thank you. I thank the minister for that. I'd like to just move on to another area of questioning here and ask the minister, why does budget 23-24 actually spend less on fiscal policy? On page 37, it shows that there's nearly $160,000 less being spent this year.
The honorable minister.
Yes, thank you. In respect of the question regarding the fiscal policy and corporate services, which is housed in the department itself, there's 4 FTEs will be moving over to the Manitoba Financial Services Agency, which is set up as an SOA, Special Operating Agency now, dealing with pensions. Yeah, so that agency will deal with pensions agencies and those types of things. So previously, the same work was being done within the department. Felt it was more accurate to have those FTEs reflected in that SOA. So no change in number of staff, just a transfer of those FTEs to the SOA.
The honorable member for St. James.
I'd like to ask, does the Department of Finance track how much money is spent on outside consultants centrally? And if not?
The honorable minister.
Sorry, can I get the member to repeat that question, please?
The honorable member for St. James.
So the question was, does the Department of Finance track how much money is spent on outside consultants centrally?
The Honourable Minister.
Sure. As far as the, thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as the outside contracting, we do obviously keep track of that. We do hire outside consulting when necessary, when deemed necessary. We proactively disclose any contract worth $10,000 or more on the website through OpenMB is the website there. So OpenMB, any contracts over $10,000. Going back to previous questions raised by the member in terms of budget allocation. So for the childcare, the $10 childcare daycare, I indicated we'd spent $135,000 on that. The total budget in this year's budget is $500,000 for that initiative. And on the campaign for the actual budget itself, I said had spent $210,000 to date. The total budget for that is $290,000. Hopefully that will answer the members' questions on that front.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
Yeah, I thank the minister for that information. Just going back to the question about spend on outside consultants, relating to the department itself, the Department of Finance, how much does it spend on consultants, or how much did it spend on consultants last fiscal? And is that included in the corporate services line on page 37?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the 37 FTEs within that appropriation, the fiscal policy and corporate services, we have 37 FTEs. The dollar figure for those 37 FTEs is just over 3.2 million. So that will be reflective of staff within the department. That particular branch also has an operating budget of $276,000. So if they were going to do any contracting out, that would come out of that $276,000 operating account, if you will. So in terms of the contracts or anything that we do contract out, again, anything over 10,000 is shown on the OpenMB website. So I guess what we would do in terms of accumulated from 22-23 year, we would just go back and add up whatever those columns are that have been reported publicly, and then we would come up with that figure.
So in the public accounts, we also report schedule example supplies and services
Oh, that would be.
or other operating. So those contracts.
May, when the summary financial statements do come out, there's a couple lines that the member may look for. Supplies and services, which could fall in the area of services that have been contracted out. That's reported. And I think another operating too that could fall into that particular category. So later in the year, when you look for the financial statements to roll out for this year, member could have a look at those line items in the book.
The honorable member for St. James.
Thank you. We know, of course, federal transfers are, well, more essential than ever. We do know that we've had a big bump this year, and I guess a question that I'm hoping the minister can offer us some information on here is whether or not the department receives projections of federal transfers out into the future, and if so, what are they?
Honorable Minister.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of transfers from the federal government, obviously there's a number of categories that we look at there. If the member goes to page 12 and review the summary revenue there, you will see equalization this year budgeted for 3.5 billion. The equalization, based on a formula. All of these are based on formulas, subject to change from time to time, and subject to how the economy of the country does, what the population of the Manitoba does. So we have seen some growth in equalization or budgeting this year on that front. The Canada Healthcare transfer of 1.8 billion this year we budgeted. Again, I think you'll be aware of the conversations that have been going on with the premiers and the federal government on that. I think this year, as a result of those discussions, we booked in an additional $207 million coming from the federal government on the healthcare transfer side of things. Not sure, exactly what that will look like in years to come, but there's going to be a formula for that, so we expect certainly that won't go down in future years. The social transfer, $591 million booked in this year. Again, and there's a formula for that. And then, of course, the other item is more general, and that's shared costs and other transfers. So that 1.3 billion speaks to various agreements we have with the federal government as well. And those agreements pertain to various departments across government, whether it be education, daycare, childcare, economic development as well, post-secondary. I think there's some arrangements in there on the federal government. So those are the sort of the four areas of that we would look to in terms of payments from the federal government.
The Honorable Member for St. James.
Thank you. I may have missed it, but of course, one portion of the federal transfer is the equalization payments that were being provided from the federal government. And I am wondering if the Department of Finance has a projection for what we would assume we will receive in terms of equalization payments for the following fiscal year.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of equalization, the budget documents do talk about that. Page 116, 117, excuse me. And maybe just for sake, in terms of the record, the annual growth and equalization program is determined by a 3-year moving average of growth in Canada's nominal GDP, while fiscal capacity calculations are based on a 3-year weighted moving average of revenues with a 2-year data lag. So it is a moving target. We usually get some indication from the federal government just in advance of the budget what that's going to be. I will say at a recent meeting of finance ministers, we did have a discussion about the formula, and there's ongoing review of what that formula looks like and what it'll look like into the future as well. But again, part of that formula is based on economic activity across the country and changes in population in respect of each province as well. So a lot of factors come into play. So the bottom line is we don't always know what that figure is going to be until closer to budget times.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
So just to repeat the question, and just so we can get clarity on this, the department has at this point no projections for estimated equalization payments to be received next fiscal.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the budget documents on page 103, we do provide a sort of a future-looking, call it more like a fiscal outlook. So the provincial department will do a lot of the legwork on that. Obviously, we're pulling a lot of different factors into that, the equalization payment being one of them. And we're certainly at the mercy of the formula and some of the population growth and economic activity around the country as well. So the forecast, although general terms, it doesn't necessarily outline specifically what we're looking for equalization. Obviously, equalization figures will be factored into our total revenue going forward. So again, based on the formula and economic activity around the country. So again, the budget talks about our fiscal outlook is informed by the economic outlook and review, interim forecast 22-23 fiscal year, which obviously is going to be finalized in public accounts, as we go forward. And then by the nature of a budget, we are speculating somewhat on what these line items will look like. But we have tried to provide a forecast of revenue and expenses going forward on page 103, right up to the year 26-27 budget year.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
I thank the Minister for the response. So we are in a period of unprecedented sort of fiscal challenges. I think we've got a lot of economic uncertainty right now, more than ever, or at least more than in recent memory. I know there's a lot of talk about recession across not only in Canada, but in other countries as well. It is, I think, safe to assume that a recessionary period in Canada, there would be a likely potential reduction in those equalization payments. There's also the risk in this kind of environment of other provinces requiring, needing to be a recipient of those equalization payments. For example, we know Ontario years ago ended up becoming a recipient of equalization, and that did shift the way that those dollars were, of course, split amongst provinces. So the question I'm hoping the minister can provide some clarity on is what kind of circumstances or situations could possibly lead to a reduction in the size of those equalization payments for Manitoba?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clearly when we set out to do budget work, we have to be cognizant of what not only our economy is doing, but other economies around the country as well. And I know that the budget documents reference GDP. I think this past year we're looking at a 3.6% growth, which was third in the country. If you take out Saskatchewan, Alberta, and the oil side of it, that type of revenue, we had the highest GDP in the country. So we're pretty happy with that. Again, when we do our forecasts, I think there's 9 different agencies that provide input and advice to provinces and to Manitoba. We take an average of those 9 agencies and put our predictions together for our budget. We expect this year real growth of 0.7% is what we've budgeted for our budget. And I know that the member did reference the potential of a recession or a downturn in the economy. And anything we've heard from those 9 agencies or the Bank of Canada as well, Manitoba is rather unique compared to a number of other jurisdictions. We do have probably the most diversified economy in the country. So that protects us well from recession and recessionary activities. So we are not like Ontario, which obviously relies on the auto industry there, or take Alberta with the oil industry. we're just that much more diversified. So we don't see the fluctuations in GDP like other provinces do because of our diversification here in Manitoba. So although there is some talk recently about potential for recession in some areas of the country, they haven't really pointed to Manitoba to have an impact, a negative impact in terms of, at least in terms of a recession. Clearly, we have to be mindful of, there's interest rates and a lot of other things that come into play in terms of our economic activity. And I think right now, what's really holding our economy back is the labor supply. And if we can attract more Manitobans to Manitoba, or keep Manitobans in Manitoba and keep them gainfully employed, that will be reflective on increase in GDP. And clearly that's positive for us because more Manitobans working creates greater opportunities for wealth for government. And quite frankly, that's how we pay for the social services such as healthcare and education and those other social services that Manitobans so desire. So clearly we are mindful of that potential. Again, optimistic that Manitoba is going to be in a good place. And the formula, the equalization formula, is based on a number of different elements, and those all come into play. So we're certainly, I don't think we're too concerned about any downturn in equalization payments to Manitoba. Again, that's our perspective on it, and but obviously being mindful of what's happening around the country as well.
The honourable member for St. James.
Appreciate the response, and the question was really focused on what the minister and what the department would perceive as being key risks that would potentially lead to a significant downturn in the level of the equalization payment. So I'll just ask again if the minister would provide that. What does the department perceive to be key risks to those current equalization payments and the rates at which we're receiving them? Again, I mentioned one possibility, another province requiring some support and becoming a recipient of those payments could significantly alter the way that those funds are distributed. What are the risks from the department's perspective and from the minister's perspective to our current equalization payment rates?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess in terms of equalization, clearly we have to be mindful of economic activity around the rest of the country as well. We all share in that. We all share in the economic opportunities that exist, and some provinces share more in the equalization side of things. So we have to be mindful of the economy across the country. So when you talk about risk, yeah, clearly, there's risk if we do get into a wide recession. But again, Canada's economy is pretty diversified as well, and that's some of the positive nature of actually having an equalization program, such as designed. I think the other part that we should be aware of is the very nature of the formula within the equalization program. Again, I made reference to the 3-year moving average of growth in Canada's GDP. So, if we do have a downturn, say in Ontario, that's not immediately impacting Manitoba's equalization because it's a moving target. So it's more of an average in there, so that those impacts aren't felt right away. So the equalization formula itself does actually provide a buffer to provinces that are receiving equalization. So that is built inherently into the formula, which certainly helps provinces such as Manitoba. The fiscal capacity calculations are based on a 3-year, it's a weighted moving average of revenues. And I said before too, there's a 2-year lag in data. So that in itself should give us a heads up. If we're seeing a strong downturn in the economy, that lag will not impact equalization for some time to come. So that gives provinces such as Manitoba a time to adapt to that, because we will have some time to see that trend. So if things are trending across the country in a negative fashion, then we'll have some time to see how the formula responds to that, and then allows us some time as a province to respond to that downtime or that downturn, and because there is a lag in the formula. So inherently built into the formulas, it gives us an opportunity to be, we will see those downturns coming, and then we can adjust if we have to make those adjustments.
The honourable member for St. James.
Yeah, I thank the minister for the information. And just, of course, to put a finer point on it, the concern is that we've seen this government make a number of decisions as it relates to tax changes that provide particularly large benefit to, in some cases, out-of-province corporations, or those who are in, you would call the sort of ultra-wealthy category of Manitobans. And there's some serious concerns about the wisdom of those decisions in light of our broader fiscal uncertainty. I want to talk a bit about the education property tax rebate, and we know, building on what I was just sharing there, that rebate does unfortunately provide wildly disproportionate benefits to the very wealthiest people in the province. And of course, we do know that it is also providing benefits, as our leader was sharing earlier in question period, to out-of-province folks who certainly are not in need of financial benefits like the Koch brothers or others. And more to the point here in this question, we know that it's also the check approach, which has been proposed, or which is being utilized, is a rather inefficient way to send money to people. Last year, when the province mailed out checks, we know that 4.1% weren't cashed as of June 9th, 2022. And we're hoping the minister can update us on how many checks remain uncashed.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And certainly in terms of the school property tax rebate, it was clearly a policy decision our government took a number of years ago to assist homeowners on their property tax bill in respect of the education component. And I would say, rightly or wrongly, we have been funding certainly a portion of education through the property tax system. Very, very few provinces continue to do it that way. Our feeling, and I think most Manitobans would feel, that's probably not an equitable way to fund education. Obviously, we're trying to find a more equitable way to fund education through general revenue as opposed to the property tax. And I think it's over the years, it's really shifted how much certain individuals were paying because of property valuations. And in particular on farmland, where we have an increase in property assessments, we were finding farmers were paying a higher portion, an amount, into the education. So we're trying to find a way to balance how we fund education more appropriately. So we've taken the initiative back in, I guess 2021 was the first time we rebated. I think that was at the 25% level for residential homeowners, 10% in the business community. That amounted to $246 million for rebates to Manitobans. In 2022, we increased the rebate to 37.5% for Manitobans, and that amounted to $350 million. And in 2023, we've gone to the 50% level for residential homeowners, keeping the business component at 10%. So Manitobans will realize a net savings there of $450 million this year. So it is a substantial realignment, we think an appropriate realignment in terms of how we fund education. And I think Manitobans should be well aware that because we are providing relief to homeowners through this rebate, we are also continuing to fund education. And we're continuing to fund education actually at record levels. I know the minister responsible for K-12 education made the announcement of a 6.1% increase of funding to K-12 this year. Over $100 million more money going into the K-12 education this year than last year. And we have been making ongoing increasing payments to school divisions. And in fact, since we came to office, we have had a 23% increase in funding to K-12 education. So Manitobans should be well aware that even though we're providing tax relief to them through the property tax rebate, we are also making sure that we are funding K-12 education as well, with year-over-year annual increases to education. So clearly, it was a policy decision that our government undertook to provide some rebate and some assistance to property owners. And we think it's a more equitable way to help fund education. Certainly, we also providing affordability checks recently through the carbon tax rebate. I think we had about 700,000 checks rolled out in the mail over the last couple of months. And I will say this through BITSA, in case people do not receive their checks in the mail, we also have the opportunity for them to get their relief when they file their income tax for 2023 2023. So we're making sure that Manitobans have every opportunity to get that particular rebate.
The honourable member for St. James.
Thank you. I'll ask the question again because although I missed some of the answer, my understanding is that it wasn't clarified. Can the minister update this House on how many checks still remain uncashed? He's got more class, Wayne. He's not going to do that.
The honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you. In fact, staff have been working diligently to get us the information that the member asked for. So there was 438,000 checks sent out. Just over 17,000 were uncashed. Staff tell me that's 3.9%.
The honourable member for St. James.
Appreciate that information, and I guess just to add to that, I'm going to go to another question, but if it would be possible to obtain the total value of those checks, that 3.9% that weren't cashed, that would be that would be appreciated. Can the minister share how much it cost to send out the physical checks during the last fiscal?
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of the, this is the 2022 property tax rebate checks that were mailed out. $350 million total that was sent out. Records say there was $9.3 million not cashed. Again, that's about the same figure. It's about 3.9% on the monetary side versus the volume of checks that were not cashed as well. To the members' other question in respect of what is the dollar figure for that? I don't have exactly the figures for the property tax checks that were mailed out, but I do know the carbon tax relief fund checks that were mailed out this spring. Total cost to government was $1.15. So that's all in costs. So that is the cost of physically producing the checks, the envelopes, and the mailing costs. So that's $1.15 at $1.15, all in costs per check. So on that, I think there was 470,000 checks sent out under the education property tax was 430,000. Yeah, so there's 430,000 checks sent out for the education property tax rebate. We just sent 700,000 checks out this spring to Manitobans that qualified for the carbon tax rebate fund. And again, you just do the math, 700,000 checks times $1.15, just somewhere in that $1 million range for this year. So I would assume that it was probably very worthwhile that the same parameters would apply to the education property checks, probably somewhere in that $1.15 range as well. I should add too, and I had the same conversation with the department that the members raising. Is this the most effective, efficient way to get Manitoba's money back to them? And clearly, I think what we did in our budget was we think the most effective way to get Manitobans' money is to allow them to keep the money in the first place. And that's exactly why we have created historic tax breaks for Manitobans. So now that we have, expecting we can allow Manitobans beginning in July to keep some of their hard-earned money, up a lot of them for close to $75 per month on their paychecks in July. We think that is the most efficient way to allow Manitobans to keep their money. In the meantime, to support some of these activities like the carbon tax rebate, we did look at other avenues. And the challenges that the department has had in the past, trying to go to some kind of an electronic, automated banking system where we could just send money to accounts, we were finding that Manitobans were changing their bank information on a regular basis. So we ended up not being as efficient in terms of getting that money transferred to Manitobans. So I know it seems easy that there might be other avenues, but again, probably not as efficient in terms of trying to get money to Manitobans. So we looked at it, at different options. We made sure when we sent out the carbon tax relief funds that we provided time for Manitobans to make sure that we had their correct mailing address. And then once we did that, we started the system rolling and started sending out the checks as soon as we could after the announcement. So again, excited about Manitobans getting close to $200 million on that carbon tax rebate over the last several weeks.
The honourable member for St. James.
Appreciate the response, and in there the minister was referenced that is the new tax commitments that they've made, and that he feels that they're taking an efficient approach to getting dollars to Manitobans. I just, in relation to the question here, which is the approach as it relates to the education property tax rebates, why not just offer that to Manitobans on the front end and not have them be out of pocket and require them to wait until a check arrives. What's the thinking behind that, and what can the minister share in terms of why his government is choosing to take this route instead of just allowing Manitobans who are, for the most part, facing significant affordability challenges? Why not just let them keep those dollars in their pocket on the front end?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And yeah, certainly we've made the conscious decision to try to provide relief to Manitoba homeowners through this rebate system. The other thing we were doing, I mean, we did signal a number of years ago that we wanted to take the funding of education right off of the property tax altogether and come up with a more equitable way for Manitobans to pay for education. Obviously, that's a lofty goal. We recognize that's a lofty goal. It's a substantial budget item for us. That's why we've taken the incremental approach to dealing with that. And those are decisions that we make around the budget process each year. So the percentage of rebates that we are providing to Manitobans is made on an annual basis around the budget table, obviously ratified by Cabinet. And as I did say, we have been increasing that. We started at 25% for property owners, residential owners, and on the ag farmland side, and 10% on the commercial side. And we've kept the commercial rate the same at 10% over the last 3 years. We have increased last year the rebate on property owners, personal property owners, and farmland to 37.5%. And then we continued, again, making a bold move, I would say, to increase the residential and farmland rebate to 50%. Again, that's $450 million assistance to property owners. And as I say, we're changing these figures during the budget process. And I think the members should be aware of the property and the education property tax notices are sent through the local municipalities. So to make changes to that current system would take some time, would obviously take some considerable investment as well. And again, as these percentages fluctuate on an annual basis, we just deemed it the appropriate way to move forward on providing assistance to Manitoba homeowners and agriculture producers. Not saying that we couldn't change that into the future. I think our goal has always been to eliminate the education property tax from homeowners altogether. But as I say, that is a big task and something that can't be done overnight. But we're always mindful of trying to find effective ways to make sure that Manitobans keep more of their hard-earned tax money as well. So we're certainly not opposed to looking at options as well, but it does get complicated when you're dealing with over 100 municipalities as well.
The honorable member for St. James.
Yeah, I'd just like to apologize for needing to leave suddenly like that, and do appreciate the answer and look forward to reviewing it later in Hansard. I'd like to move on to discuss FIPA and some of the results that were discussed in the supplement. On page 28, it says that the department's target for FIPA responses completed on time is 100%, quote, based on legislative requirements for on-time responses, end quote. Yet the baseline for Manitoba Finance was only 35%. I'm hoping the minister can explain why the department was missing its legislative requirement to complete FIPA responses on time.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thank the member for raising that. I see, I wasn't aware of that, finance is certainly behind the rest of government. So I appreciate him raising that question. I think is some explanation in the document as well that does reflect that we do have a backlog that we have to address. So the department has allocated additional positions to the access to information function in order to improve response time compliance and reduce the number of overdue requests. As of January 20th of this year, the number of backlogged requests for information dropped by 87%. The department has reprioritized resources to eliminate the backlog and increase compliance under the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. We're also in the process of implementing a new centralized intake process and software solution for information requests under FIPA. This will increase the efficiency of processing requests and improve the consistency of handling requests and the client's experience. So we will be working with digital technology solutions, and the vendor will build a software solution, and the department will work collaboratively with a cross-departmental team to increase use of the Access software across all government departments. So we are going to be making investments in technology that I think will help provide a solution to some of these outstanding issues. I will say the FIPA component through finance is being handled by Communications and Engagement Division. And in fact, that division, we've just approved additional 3 FTEs for that particular division. So I'm optimistic with some new staff being allocated to that particular branch and some new FTEs added to that branch, that the issue the member raised will be resolved. Again, the 38% figure is in respect of the 21-22 year. Our target, again, still remains 100%, and that's why we are making investments in both resources, personnel resources, and we're also making investments in operational funding for that particular branch as well. Certainly making information available to Manitobans is a priority for our government, and certainly the 38% figure from 21-22 will be improved, I'm sure, in the 22-23 documents when you see those later in the year. So again, making investments in funding and investments in personnel to try to address that particular situation.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
I do appreciate the response. I think it is important on the record just to respond to the idea that this is a priority for government. The 35% result is dismal by any measure. And of course, that's having a real impact on Manitobans' ability to access information as they're supposed to be able to do. We know that, and I guess just before I move on, I'm hearing the Minister share that there are IT investments to be made, that we will be hiring new individuals to support improving those numbers. But I guess just to understand more clearly there, is the Minister stating that that number is a function of understaffing in that area?
The Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, I want to make sure that I highlight for the member opposite and for the record, again, this was the results in 21-22 fiscal year in terms of finance. I expect the numbers will be significantly improved in this year's documents, once you see the 22-23 documents. I would suggest that we had probably, staff were checking on the number of submissions we had as well. And I think that can go a long way, I would think, to explaining the situation we had. So looking forward to seeing what those numbers are, if there wasn't, in fact, an increase in submissions under FIPA. I can also say that I think we reflect back in 21-22, we were still suffering from the hangover of COVID, if you will. And we had a lot of staff were doing different things and multitasking and trying to provide information to Manitobans in respect of COVID. So a lot of things happened over that course of that couple of years, and I think we're still working our way through COVID recovery. And to the member's point, it certainly could have been a staffing issue. Again, we've taken steps to deal with that. We've moved people into that branch, and I think we've actually dedicated people within that branch to dealing with FIPA as well. And then just recently, I know we've allocated, I think just in the last few weeks, 3 additional FTEs to this branch. So hopefully that will help in this regard. So certainly there's a lot of things going on there. I think we'll see significant improvements. Again, investments in the technology, I think, will help all across government to deal with what I think is probably going to be an increase in the amount of FIPAs that we're seeing across government. I will say on the other side, we're trying to be proactive in providing information to Manitobans. And we're trying to do that across government as well. And we're taking those initiatives. Certainly departments have been encouraged to be more proactive in putting information on websites and out to Manitobans so that Manitobans can find this information easily and not create sort of that administrative burden, if you will, having people to work through the system to find answers for their inquiries. So I would say, a lot of things working on this front. We're always open to advice on how we can improve this, but I think with the investment in information technology and a software solution, I really think that will help address some of the backlog and also help with, I think is going to be an increase in the number of FIPA requests as well.
The Honorable Member for St. James.
Appreciate the response. It is good to hear that there are some proposed improvements that will help to support improving those numbers, and that would be good, of course, for Manitobans to ensure they can get the access they deserve to information when it's requested, and will improve transparency, and that has been an issue for several years. I guess to that point, this issue has been ongoing for some time now, where FIPA responses have not been met on time. And I guess I'd love to hear the minister share just more broadly why this issue hasn't been responded to before. We're in year 7 here of his government. This issue has been ongoing and has persisted for some time. We know that his government brought forward legislation that gives them even more time to respond to FIPAs and extends things to, I think, from what some would perceive as being far too long a time frame for responses. But they've made those changes to create more leeway. So I don't know if that was considered a strategy for improving response times. But just broadly speaking, can the minister share why they're deciding to take action now in year 7? Why wasn't action taken years ago when this issue started to become a concern?
The Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. In respect of the question regarding FIPAs, staff was able to pull up some information for us in respect of sort of the year-over-year increases in FIPA requests, as well as the FIPAs that were responded to as well year over year. So, and again, these figures are across government, across all government departments and agencies. And I would say back in 2016, we had just over 1,700 requests. 1,300 were completed. 2017, a rise of almost to 2,200 requests in 17. Over 1,900 were responded to. You look at 2018, again, an increase up to over 2,300 requests. Almost 2,000 of those were completed. We move into 2019, again, another increase in requests at 2,500. 2,100 were responded to. And then as we got into the COVID period, 2020, again, an increase in FIPAs of 2,600. Close to 2,200 of those were responded to. And then a pretty substantial increase in 2021, almost 3,000 requests for information across government and agencies. And 2,500 of those were responded to in 2021. And just to give the member a bit of a view into where we are so far this year. So this was the first quarter of 22. Right, 740. So if we extrapolate that, that's going to be somewhere close to 3,000 requests for information in 2022 if we extrapolate the first quarter of the year in 22. So clearly the numbers have been increasing as we go. The number of completions and responses have also been increasing as well. I'm not here to make excuses for previous actions of government. I think clearly more work has to be done, and we've identified that. So we are moving people within the branch to deal with FIPA requests. Again, I think we should make sure we understand a lot of people in communications and engagement were involved on the pandemic front. And may have got involved in that on a more regular basis. And, FIPA maybe have got reduced, but I do know the number of requests completed certainly increased during that time as well. So I don't want to use the pandemic as an excuse, but certainly it's something we have to be mindful of. The department has moved people into the area where they are responding to FIPAs within that branch. And we have committed additional staff to that branch. And we also is committed to the IT for that particular undertaking as well. So again, optimistic as we go forward, we will have a more effective tool to respond to Manitobans with their inquiries. And I think that's the important thing as we move forward.
The Honourable Member for St. James.
I thank the minister for that. I do want to ask a question in a different area here of interest. Yesterday in the exchange between the Premier and our leader, the MLA for Fort Rouge, there was a discussion around collective bargaining settlements and collective bargaining agreements. A quote from the Premier here, it says, "The fact of the matter is that when we are anticipating that, potential collective bargaining agreements are completed, we budget for them." And so the question for the Finance Minister is, which finance budget line would contain that information where government has budgeted for these agreements?
The Honorable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify too in respect of FIPA. Certainly, we were talking primarily about the Department of Finance and where our FIPA is held in the Communications and Engagement branch. And again, we're trying to design an IT program to be used across government. But each department within government is responsible for their own FIPA as well. So just wanted to clarify that we in finance don't respond to FIPAs all across government. Each department will have their own FIPA coordinator and be responsible for. But clearly we're driving the IT function for FIPA as we go forward. And recognizing that we've got some work to do within our department to get better results than what we've seen in the past. So as far as salaries, so what we do from a budget perspective is within each department, we will have a line item for salaries in each department. That item is reflective of known contracts. So if we know what is, if the contract's been resolved and we know what the firm numbers are, then we will book those numbers in the budget for each respective department. If a contract is outstanding within a department, we have allowed that under our enabling appropriation in contingencies. In fact, you will find an item on page 157 that talks about our internal service adjustments, contingencies, and limited term funding. So one item there, you will find a line item of contingencies and unanticipated events and other expenditures. I know we had a discussion about that last time we met. So this is exactly a line item that you will see for any of those contracts that haven't been resolved. So we try to book the unknowns in this area under contingencies. That's why we have a internal service adjustment area of our budget. So the knowns we book, the unknowns we book in ISA.
The Honorable Member for St. James.
And just in relation to that, has the MAHCP settlement or the prospective settlement and negotiation, has that been included anywhere in that budget line?
Order.
Way less
The
than that.
hour being 5 p.m. Committee rise.